What is debt? For most of us, the word conjures images of credit card bills, student loans, mortgages. It feels distinctly modern, a consequence of our complex, fast-paced world. We think of money, banks, and digital transactions. But what if this understanding is incomplete? What if debt is something far older, far more fundamental to the human story? What if I told you that debt is not a product of money, but that money is a product of debt? This is the secret history we are about to uncover, an invisible thread that connects us all, stretching back to the very dawn of civilization itself. This invisible thread is a force that has shaped our societies in ways we rarely acknowledge. It built our cities, it financed our empires, it fueled our wars. It is an idea of obligation, a promise made between two people, two communities, or even two nations. Before coins were ever minted, before paper money was ever printed, this concept of owing and being owed was already organizing human life. It was a social glue, a way to manage relationships and ensure cooperation. From a simple favor exchanged between neighbors to the grand ambitions of kings, debt was there, quietly choreographing the dance of human interaction. Consider the world around you, the roads you travel on, the schools your children attend, the technologies that connect us across vast distances. So much of this infrastructure, both physical and social, was made possible by some form of credit. Governments borrow to build, companies borrow to innovate, individuals borrow to invest in their future. We live in a world built on promises. These promises are a form of trust, a belief that a future obligation will be met. This trust is the bedrock of our economic system, yet its roots go deeper than any bank vault, reaching into the very soil of our shared past. This journey we are embarking on is a quest to understand this powerful, often misunderstood force. We will peel back the layers of history to reveal debt not as a modern burden, but as an ancient tool. It is a tool that has been used to create immense prosperity and to inflict terrible suffering. It has been the engine of progress and the trigger for collapse. By understanding its long and complex history, we can begin to see our own world more clearly. We can start to ask more profound questions about the nature of our economy, our society, and the promises we make to one another and to future generations. Our story does not begin in a bustling stock exchange or a modern bank. It begins with a simple artifact, a piece of clay marked with lines and symbols, or perhaps a wooden stick carved with notches. These are some of humanity's oldest records. They are not poems or epic tales of heroes. They are ledgers. They are records of who owes what to whom. Discovered in Mesopotamia and beyond, these humble objects are profound. They tell us that long before cash, we had credit. The first things we wrote down were our debts. Think about what that means. In a world without money, how did societies function? The common story is barter. I have a chicken, you have a pot, and we trade. But barter is clumsy and inefficient. What if you don't need a chicken right now? The reality was more sophisticated. Economies ran on social credit. Farmers were advanced seeds from the community temple, promising a share of the harvest. A craftsperson supplied goods to a neighbor, creating obligations, perhaps repaid with a different service or a favor. These debts were not impersonal. They were embedded in social fabric. Relationships, the notched stick, the tally stick, was brilliant. A stick was marked, then split lengthwise. Creditor kept one half, debtor kept the other. The two halves fit perfectly. An unbreakable record, an artifact of trust, a physical promise. It was used in England to record taxes until the 19th century. The shift from memory to written record was a revolution. Obligations could be tracked across time and distance. Debt was depersonalized into formal contracts overseen by authority, like a temple or a palace. Debt transformed from social tool to economic instrument. The birth of accounting, foundation of complex economies. Recording a promise on clay set humanity on a new, irreversible course. To truly understand debt, we must follow its timeline. Our investigation will be a journey from artifact to impact. We will start with these ancient clay tablets, tally sticks, and trace the evolution of this powerful idea through the ages. We will see how this simple concept of obligation was scaled up, formalized, and weaponized. It became an engine for building civilizations and, at times, a catalyst for their destruction. This is not just a history of finance. It is a history of human power, ambition, ingenuity. It is the story of how we learned to organize ourselves on a massive scale. As cities grew larger and more complex in ancient Mesopotamia, a new institution rose to the center of economic life: the temple. These were not just places of worship, sprawling economic complexes, vast landowners, administrative heart of the city-state. Command of the new technology of writing put temple priests and scribes in position to manage an intricate web of debt that held their society together. They inadvertently created the world's first banks, centralized managers of credit, long before coins. Seen as the household of the patron god, its assets were considered divine property, giving it unmatched stability. The temple advanced seeds and tools at planting, creating debts repaid with a portion of the harvest. Not merely loans, sacred obligations overseen by the gods, meticulously recorded on clay tablets by scribes. The temple pooled surplus from thousands of farmers and redistributed it to fund other sectors. It paid rations to craftspeople weaving textiles, the builders maintaining irrigation canals, and the soldiers defending the city walls. The urban economy, farmer to potter, was integrated into a single accounting system, all managed from the temple's central ledger. This allowed humanity to dream on a scale never before imagined. How do you organize and feed tens of thousands of laborers for years or even decades to build something as monumental as a pyramid in Egypt? The answer is a sophisticated system of organized credit. The workers, not slaves, skilled laborers and seasonal farmers needed to be housed, clothed, and most importantly, fed. The state, under the divine authority of the pharaoh, acted as the great creditor. It advanced rations, becoming a debit against the labor that the workers provided. The entire project was an immense accounting exercise. This civilizational engine, fueled by debt, created a positive feedback loop. Grand projects increased the surplus, enabling it to undertake even more ambitious projects, field larger armies, and expand its influence. Debt converted agricultural wealth into tangible power, monuments, infrastructure, and military might. The formalization of debt in the temples of Sumer led to another, more controversial innovation: the concept of interest. Initially, loans of grain were expected to be paid back with a small surplus. This was not seen as exploitative. Seeds multiply when planted, and livestock reproduces. The Sumerian word for interest, mash, was the same word used for a calf, reinforcing this idea of natural increase. However, the application of interest soon created profound social problems. A bad harvest could leave a farmer unable to repay their debt, but the interest kept accumulating. This was the birth of the debt trap. This problem became particularly acute when debts were no longer just about productive goods like barley, but about silver. Silver does not reproduce, it does not grow. Charging interest on a loan of silver was a purely abstract financial operation, detached from the natural cycles of the world. This abstraction made debt more powerful and more dangerous, a force that could create wealth for the creditor, but destitution for the debtor. The rulers of ancient Mesopotamia were not blind to the destructive power of escalating debt. A society where a large portion of the population was hopelessly indebted was an unstable society. The problem became so severe that it required a radical solution. This solution was the Clean Slate Proclamation, or what historians sometimes call the Great Forgiveness. These royal edicts, found inscribed on clay cylinders like the famous Cyrus cylinder, would declare Amagi, literally return to mother, signifying the return of debt servants to their families and the restoration of foreclosed lands to their original owners. It was a societal reset button. These proclamations were not acts of sentimental generosity. They were a pragmatic tool of statecraft. The rulers recognized that the logic of mathematics was incompatible with the logic of a sustainable society. By periodically wiping the slate clean, they prevented the formation of a permanent debt aristocracy and preserved the class of small, independent farmers. Our story now travels westward to the burgeoning power of Rome. The Roman Republic was built on a foundation of debt. Rome's expansion depended on its legendary legions, its vast network of roads, its sprawling public works. All of it was lubricated by a constant flow of credit. The state used public contracts, the publicani, private syndicates of wealthy individuals bidding to collect taxes in a province. They lent the state massive sums up front. This privatized state finance fueled a cycle of expansion. More territory meant more tax revenue, which funded new wars. Debt became the engine of the Roman war machine, but the system produced deep social tensions. Small farmers, backbone of the army, were forced into debt. Unable to pay, many lost land and flocked to Rome, creating a volatile, landless urban population. The struggle between debtors and creditors defined Roman politics and fueled populist leaders promising debt relief. The very debts that financed Rome's rise sowed the seeds of its internal decay. With the fall of Rome, the sophisticated credit systems of the ancient world largely disappeared from Western Europe. Trade contracted, cities shrank. For centuries, the primary institution with any semblance of continent-wide structure was the Catholic Church. Monasteries became important economic centres, preserving the knowledge of accounting. However, Christian doctrine held a deep suspicion of money lending for profit. The concept of usury was condemned as a sin. The revival of large-scale trade began in the Italian city-states. Merchants needed new financial tools to manage their complex and risky ventures. They cleverly circumvented the church's ban. Instead of charging interest, they would deal in bills of exchange, a written promise from the banker. The merchant could present the bill and receive the equivalent value in local currency. Families like the Medici in Florence became astonishingly wealthy and powerful, not as landowners or warlords, but as masters of this new world of international finance. A signature on a piece of paper could now be worth more than a chest of gold. This marked the birth of a new and world-changing concept: sovereign debt, direct loans from bankers to rulers. Initially, lending to a sovereign was an incredibly risky business. If he chose to default on his loan, there was little a banker could do. A major breakthrough occurred in England. It established the Bank of England in 1694. This was a pivotal moment. The government's promise to pay was now backed by a permanent professional institution. This created the world's first liquid market for government debt. For the first time, lending to the state was not a risky personal deal with a monarch, but a secure long-term investment in a permanent national institution. The Napoleonic Wars were the ultimate showcase for this new reality. Britain was a smaller island nation. Its primary weapon was not a massive conscript army, but its superior financial system. This let Britain outspend Napoleon until his final defeat at Waterloo in 1815. The victory cemented the link between national debt, military power, and the modern nation-state. A well-managed debt could be immense strength, fund industrialization, build infrastructure, and project power globally. Our journey now brings us to the modern era, the 20th century. Here, the scale and scope of debt exploded in ways our ancestors could have never imagined. Two major developments made debt a ubiquitous feature of everyday life. The first was the rise of consumer credit. In post-war America, a new idea took hold. Borrowing for consumption. The credit card, the auto loan, the mortgage became rites of passage. Mass production required mass consumption to keep the factories running. Consumer credit provided the fuel. The American dream was built on credit. The second major development was the evolution of central banking and the disconnection of money from precious metals. The world's currencies were no longer backed by gold. They became fiat currencies. This freed governments and their central banks to manage their economies. They could create money and expand credit to fight recessions or fund social programs. This gave rise to the vast national debts we see today. The global financial system became an intricate, interconnected web of promises, with trillions of dollars in debt crisscrossing the globe every day. In 2008, the intricate global machine of modern debt shuddered and nearly collapsed. The crisis was born from the same fundamental drivers. The raw material was the American mortgage. These individual debts were bundled together, sliced up, and resold to investors around the world as seemingly safe assets. But when American house prices began to fall, borrowers defaulted, and these complex debt instruments became toxic. The credit markets, the lifeblood of the modern economy, froze solid. Today, in 2024, the reverberations of that crisis continue. In response, central banks flooded the world with cheap credit. Global debt levels are now significantly higher than they were before the 2008 crisis. We have solved a debt crisis by creating even more debt. The 2008 reckoning was a warning. Have we truly learned the lessons of our debt-fueled history? Shut. New technologies are emerging that could fundamentally rewrite the rules of obligation once again. Blockchain technology and digital currencies are poised to disrupt ours. At its core, it is a solution to a very old problem: how to create trust between strangers without relying on a central authority like a bank or a government. Smart contracts could automate many functions. Decentralized finance, DeFi, aims to build an alternative financial system, lending, borrowing, exchanging assets. Of course, this road is fraught with challenges. Digital currencies remain volatile, risky, and poorly understood by many. We are in the earliest days of the digital ledger. We may be witnessing the birth of a new artifact of trust, a new architecture of obligation that will reshape the meaning of debt in the 21st century and beyond. Our long journey is coming to an end. This secret history reveals that debt is not inherently good or bad. It is a tool. Like any tool, it can be used to build or to destroy. This is not just a technical problem for economists and central bankers. It is a moral and political question for all of us. What do we truly owe to one another? Our financial debts are just one expression of a much deeper web of obligations to the environment, to future generations, to the least fortunate members of our global community. Reimagining debt means thinking about how we can use this powerful tool for collective goals, to finance the transition to a sustainable economy, to fund education and healthcare for all, and to build a more equitable and resilient world. By understanding the deep history of this invisible thread, we can begin to weave it into a new pattern. We can aim to transform debt from a source of anxiety and fragility into a tool for shared prosperity, ensuring that the promises we make today build a better, more stable, and more just world for the generations to come. The future of debt and of our civilization is yet to be written.